Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathaning and today we'll be talking about the 10 most dangerous champions that you need to be banning on patch 11.12. It's always a tall order to carry feeding teammates, but the champions in this video make it feel completely impossible to win when they get out of control on the enemy team. So we'll be starting off things in the top lane with Riven. Riven is an often overlooked ban for most top laners. She isn't necessarily the most popular champion in the role, but when she is picked, it's not always a nightmare situation. That's because Riven has both a high skill floor and high skill ceiling. That means to play her well enough to just have a decent impact, the player really needs to have an idea of what they're doing. And to play her perfectly, they need to have incredible mechanics. But when you do run into somebody with those mechanics, the lane can feel practically unwinnable. Truly good Riven players can even turn hard counters like Garen and Renekton into skill matchups. And once she gets a single kill, you're dead anytime she has her ultimate up. Plenty of top laners are great split pushers when they're ahead due to their kits being designed around being duelists. But what makes Riven such a scary champion is how well she can carry team fights as well. With the Fed Darius or Jax, you can at least kite them to death most of the time. But with Riven, she has an insane amount of mobility in her kit, so she can always easily navigate fights, dodging incoming skill shots as she jumps onto your backline. And between her shield's practically non-existent cooldown and the items in her build like Serax, Death's Dance, and Gore Drinker, it feels almost impossible to burst her down before she wipes out your carries. Our other must-ban top for this patch is Shen. While we talked about Riven because of how hard a good player can brute force a victory on her, Shen makes the list for a completely different reason. Instead of being a flashy, high damage carry, he just wins games by being methodical, playing the macro game with this late game split pushing, putting your team into a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Usually you think that any hard scaling champion with a global ultimate is at least weak and punishable early, but with Shen, that's not the case. A lot of that comes down to design philosophy. If a champion has a super impactful ultimate, but it's on a really long cooldown, the rest of their kit has to be strong, so they're not totally as useless in those long ult downtimes. The reason is that Shen's passive and basic abilities make him an insanely strong duelist. Against many auto-based bruisers, his W zone makes him practically untouchable. His Q gives him some crazy damage in trades, especially against tanks, who he completely shreds with the empowered percent-based damage. Even ranged champions struggle to punish him, since he can just use his low cooldown passive shield when he just needs to move up for farm. He normally itemizes Sunfire Aegis, Titanic Hydra, and either Thornmail or Wit's End, depending on who he's splitting against, so it's not like his dueling falls off. In fact, since he's super tanky and does a lot of damage, he can even dive a lot of champions as they try to hold towers against him later in the game. The usual weakness to split pushing strats is for the other team to group up and force a fight or objective as FUD, but with Shen's ultimate, he has that base covered. So, you either send a champion or two to answer his split and he ults to his team and forces a fight with a numbers advantage, or you just leave him to split and take towers. It's a lose-lose situation if your team doesn't have the right tools and coordination to deal with it. This video is all about champions that need to be banned, but given that your team only has 5 bans, you're only in control of one, you obviously can't ban them all. For those times when you do have to play against one of these obnoxiously OP champions, it's not like it's impossible to win the game. It's not like they're 100% win rate. Sometimes it just feels like it. It's just that they're just really difficult and frustrating to deal with. But we here at ProGuides can help you with that. Our courses and coaches can teach you everything that you need to know about winning the hardest games. If you want access to all these resources to put you ahead of everybody else in your games, head over to ProGuides.com and pick up your sub. Just remember that we're running a sick deal, so use the discount code RAKEUP2021 for a 20% off of yours today. Now let's get back on topic, shall we? Taking a look now at the jungle, we'll start things off with Shaco. If you regularly watch our meta videos, then you know that the jungle is currently being dominated by early game aggressive champions. And of all the champions in that category, none are quite as OP as Shaco. There are quite a few factors that go into that, but we'll start off by talking about the early game. First, his initial clear is insanely fast thanks to his boxes, and he's able to get to level 3 and gank before you can even touch your second buff on most champions. Even if you warn your laners a gank can and will happen, it's not like they can literally sit under tower out of XP range at level 2. Since he can just poof over walls and place boxes behind your teammates, he inevitably always seems to get fed. And as we all know, a Shaco with early kills can snowball extremely hard, re-ganking over and over and picking up kill after kill. Once fed, he can freely invade you, with little your team can do to punish him since he can just queue over a wall. Most early game junglers at least have the weakness of falling off at the later stages of the game. Look at Shen for example. While he does have some utility thanks to his ability to peel with his ultimate, it's pretty difficult to actually kill carries with him in teamfights. Frontliners can block his Q, and he's pretty easy to peel by champions with any type of displacement. As a result, he can't really hard carry 5v5s. But with Shaco, with a combination of a blink, stealth, and insane burst damage, he really makes it easy to get into a fight and burst down a squishy carry without anyone being able to actually react to it. And that's just AD Shaco. Despite being nerfed, AP Shaco is still very much alive and well. And while it may not have the same one-shot capabilities as AD Shaco, it's way more frustrating to deal with that when you're playing certain champions. And by certain champions, I mean pretty much any melee champion. It doesn't matter if you're a carry, a tank, or something in between. If your role in fights is to dive into the enemy team, but there's an AP Shaco on that team, you'll constantly be ping-ponged between boxes every single time you try to do anything to the enemy backline. His flexibility between being able to be a backline assassin or the ultimate deterrent against divers means that Shaco can pretty much be the most annoying champion in the game against any comp one way or another. So trust me, if you're not the one abusing him, you should ban him out. Our other jungler here is Khazix. Right after Shaco, he's the next best assassin in the role. Once you get some kills, you basically lose all sense of control in the jungle. Even if you yourself are fed, the obscene damage on his isolated Q and cells make his ultimate so much more unbeatable in 1v1s, especially if he gets a jump on you from a brush. Like Shaco, he's also really hard to deal with in team fights. The combination of Duskblade and his ultimate giving him several selfs throughout the course of the fight, and between those and his resetting jumps, pinning him down and actually killing him is just probably not gonna happen. Usually, you deal with bursty assassins by building tankier. That's why bruisers pretty much always beat assassins in 1v1 fights. But Kha'Zix's flexibility allows him to adapt to tankier team comps as well. Instead of going Duskblade and lethality items, he can change up his core and build Eclipse with Black Cleaver, with items like Death Stance and Sorelda's to be able to bring down the beefier targets. With jungle being a role dedicated to controlling the entire map, the complete lack of agency once Ka picks up a couple of kills and can dumpster you in 1v1s makes him a dangerous must-ban champion in our books. He quite literally will bug you. Next up, we have our mid laners. The current meta is pretty heavy on the assassins like Zed, Katarina, Talon, and Qiyana, but honestly, those aren't the ones that we're going to be talking about today. Those champions are all pretty feast or famine, and if you counterpick them, they can be shut down pretty hard. Instead, the champion that we're going to be talking about has crazy scaling and is basically impossible to shut down. With the aforementioned assassins needed to keep an early lead to really impact games, having a lane against either of these two champions who can completely neutralize the laning phase and outscale you is not something that you want to deal with. The first of these champions is Vladimir. He's the type of champion that can be down 50 CS at 20 minutes and still 1v1 you as long as he finishes 2 full items. And it's not like he's just good at 1v1ing. In fact, he's even more OP in team fights, where Flash Combo can pretty much one-shot any squishy champion that gets caught in his AoE. His biggest weakness is definitely his weaker laning phase, but even with that, he can sustain. Early on, his E doesn't really do enough damage to give him a reliable wave clear, so you can definitely apply a lot of pressure on him and just get lane priority against him, but as long as his puddle is up, you basically can't ever kill him. This means that he'll constantly be farming up, putting the game on a timer, and once that timer expires, you'll lose. Even if you do manage to kill him, like I said, he's gonna come online at some point. Our second mid laner is Anivia. Though she isn't quite as popular as she was earlier in the season, Anivia is still an incredibly strong control mage, one of the few in the class that can actually get consistent results in the current mid lane meta. Her lane neutralizing kit is super frustrating to play against. While she may not be as unkillable as Vladimir in the later stages of the game, her early laning phase is a lot stronger, and in some matchups, even completely oppressive. Early on, if you try to go anywhere near her, she just hits you with a Q and E combo to do a massive amount of burst damage, and she just flaps back to safety. As the laning phase drags on and you get your ultimate, you may have a bit more of a kill potential in most matchups, but Anivia can use her own ultimate to instantly clear the wave and then just back off, leaving you with no chance to actually fight her. Non-interactive lanes are frustrating, and leaves you with no way to actually get fed off your own lane. If you can't kill your opponent, you usually want to roam to the other lanes, but again, Anivia's instant wave clear makes this a tough choice to make. If you leave the lane and don't pick up a kill, while Anivia freely clears waves and just takes plates, she's just gonna build a huge lead over you. As the game goes on, Anivia reaches the point where her burst combo pretty much matches any assassin, while also having insane DPS and control over fights with her ultimate and wall. Like Vladimir, this puts the game on a timer, but in most cases, you just need a massive lead or a comp that can excel at diving to actually close games out because Anivia's wave clear allows her to stall games out indefinitely. Champs that are really weak and vulnerable early game but scale up super well into the mid and late game actually makes a lot of sense to me. But then you have champions like Anivia. She's able to totally neutralize pretty much any laning phase, can stall with her wave clear, and just outscales most of the other mid lane carries. These lane neutralizers are, in my opinion, very boring to play against and pretty unhealthy to the game. An unhealthy relationship. I won't make a joke about my ex. I won't do it. I'm stronger than this. Anyway, that brings us to today's question of the day. What champion do you hate to lane against? For me, the absolute #1 most annoying champion to lane against is Malzahar. Not only does he neutralize the lane with his wave clear, there's just literally no counterplay to his ultimate. Well, there is counterplay, but it's like 1300 gold, and that will put you behind a lot. So unless you have your own jungler to back you up, you basically can never move up post 6, or you risk being flashed on and suppressed by his point and click outplay button. Yeah, I also have a ton of other ones like Pyke, Yuumi, Seraphine, I could go on and on, honestly, LeBlanc. Anyway, enough about me. Let's hear from you. Let us know what you guys think in the comments down below. Moving down to the bot lane, our first champion is Draven. Taking junglers out of the equation in a solo lane, you're responsible for how things play out. If you lose a 1v1, you can't really blame anybody but yourself. But in the bot lane, it takes 2 to tango. If your support is a clueless moron, the enemy bot lane can easily take advantage of them for kills, even if you're doing everything right. Any lane is hard when your support is feeding, but it's especially hard when the champion getting fed is as snowbally as Draven. Aside from potential feeding supports, Draven's build path is also just very difficult to deal with. He naturally builds right into lifesteal, and he hits really hard on top of that. So if you lack the CC and burst to 100 to 0 him, you're probably not going to win most direct fights. But with him also building into that sustain, you won't really be able to poke him down either. There is only one answer to Draven. FF at 15. I'm just kidding. Super aggro laners that are always countered by jungle ganks, but we can't really say that's just a reliable option. For one, any laner knows that most junglers aren't always going to be exactly receptive to gank requests, especially if you spam ping them. Probably don't do that. And 2, even if your jungler does come and if you guys get baited into a counter gank, there's always the potential that Draven walks away with double buffs, 3 kills, and the game is over from that single play. ADCs getting fed can usually be at least somewhat easy to deal with by hard diving bruisers and assassins, but Draven is just built different. Even though he's pretty immobile, the movement speed from his W and the displacement from his E allows him to kite threats pretty easily. Those that do manage aren't really guaranteed to actually do anything when they reach their target. Draven autos hit hard, and with all that lifesteal, each one heals him for a huge chunk of HP. So unless he's chain CC'd and bursts it down, there's a good chance that he actually just heals through the damage of anybody jumping on him, and kills him instead. Our other ADC that you don't want to have to deal with is Tristana. Just like Draven, she has insane snowballing potential, and with how self-sufficient she is even harder to shut down when she picks up steam. She's also a lot harder to deal with in your own bot lane. In the case of Draven, even if your supports suck, you can at least sit back at max range and not be the one dying. But against Triss, she can usually close the gap by jumping in on you and bursting you down. The crazy part about Triss is just how little effort that she needs to be putting in to get a kill, even without being fed. In fact, even when she has just a few component items, Tristana's full combo is enough to almost solo kill most squishy opponents as soon as she has her ultimate. And with none of her abilities being really skill shots, there's not a lot of room for counterplay on your part. You just have to pray that your support knows how to counter engage when she jumps in. Obviously, League is a team game, but when your only real option for not dying is a teammate who knows what to do, you probably want to avoid that situation altogether, especially in the lower elos. Another strength that Tristana has is that she doesn't really need to snowball to win games. Most lane bullies are designed with a clear philosophy in mind. Be strong early, use that to get a lead, and snowball the lead to win the game. Failing to get a lead or getting one and not closing out the game results in falling off and becoming useless. But everything about Tristana's kit makes her a hyper carry. She maintains super high burst potential all throughout the game with her E and her ultimate, but she also has insane consistent DPS thanks to the huge attack speed steroid that she gets from her Q. On top of that, she has self-peel with her ultimate and high mobility thanks to her resetting jump. Oh, not to even mention that she has insane range as she levels up. Basically, her kit takes the self-sufficiency of a champion like Ezreal, the snowball potential of somebody like Draven, and the hypercarry DPS that Jinx or Kog'Maw has, throws it all together and makes one of the best options for the role for carrying the game. So, if you play ADC and you aren't abusing this champion, you should be, and if you're not, you should definitely be banning it out. Following up on our ADCs, let's round out with our list of supports. On a list of dangerous must-ban champions, you may think that most supports don't really belong here. After all, most supports aren't actually built to 1v9, but not all carrying is done by solo acing the enemy team. Some supports are still plenty dangerous due to their playmaking potential, how hard they can shut down your carry potential, enabling their own team, or some other intangible aspects. The first support that we have here is Lulu. At this point, I feel like a broken record. Lulu has been a top tier support for months, even before they randomly started giving her buffs. What the hell, right? I hope that those Space Group skins are really worth it, you know? Anyway, out of all the enabling enchanters in the game, Lulu just does about everything too well. First, let's talk about the early game. Lulu, like pretty much all of the other enchanters, pairs best with hyper carries. Her ability to buff them into turbo carries in teamfights makes plenty sense. But what makes no sense is how strong her trading in lane is. Against weaker lane opponents, namely enchanters or mage type supports, Lulu is easily able to match the short trade patterns with the burst from her E and Q combo. But enchanter versus enchanter matchups are one thing, the fact that Lulu can also win against kill lane supports like Leona or Nautilus, or at least neutralize them, is what makes her such a terrifying pick. All she has to do is shield their ADC when they get engaged on, and move forward to polymorph the opposing ADC to prevent them from any follow-up damage. Out of lane, things just get worse. When Lulu's team is in control, she can speed up her divers to send them into the enemy backline, or just throw all her buffs on a fed ADC and let them pop off. And she's just not on this list due to her ability to enable an ally. If that's all it took, Yuumi would be OP. That little bit of extra oomph that makes Lulu so OP is her polymorph. No amount of attack speed increase is going to save a hyper carry from a fed Master Yi or Zed, but turning them into a harmless squirrel or a cupcake, they just hop around and end up dying before the CC even wears off. Finishing off our list, we have Senna. After many adjustments, Riot has finally pushed Senna out of the ADC role into the support one. And while supports may technically be harder to carry with due to their lower income, it's also a lot more forgiving. Let me explain what I mean. When you play ADC Senna, you're actually last hitting the minions. Last hitting means less souls, and that means that you don't have ridiculous range. Not having ridiculous range and free stats like crit and AD means that you need to be fed enough to kill your opponents before they can kill you. If you're ahead, that's not a problem. Senna does a lot of damage when she has items, but when you're behind, you'll feel pretty useless. Now, let's look at support Senna. Not last hitting means a lot more souls from minions, so she's always going to have high range to poke your opponents from. The support build is generally a lot tankier too. Instead of taking Glacial Augment plus the Kraken Slayer combo, she runs Grasp of the Undying and builds Divine Sunderer and Black Cleaver. Most people still go Frostfire, but Divine Sunderer is definitely the better option in almost all cases. The combination of super high range and tankiness, and while also doing a good amount of damage, makes playing against support Senna very frustrating. And if the game drags on too long, she'll eventually reach the point where her range isn't just safe, it's downright oppressive. This is especially true with her being able to land auto attacks and Qs from well outside the engage range of most champions. All of that means that she's on a similar timer to the mid lane hypercarries that we talked about earlier. This timer is massively sped up when she gets to lane against low threat lanes, where she can constantly just force trades and stack souls. The one argument against her that you can make is that she's really easy to abuse with certain kill lanes, but again, this is solo queue. Unless you're duoing with a friend, there's no guarantee that you have a lane partner that can do that. So save yourself the hassle and ban her out. And that wraps up things for the 10 most dangerous champions that need to be banned on patch 11.12. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure you sub so you never miss out on our meta guides. Remember, let us know what champion you hate laning against the most in the comments down below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description as well, and definitely don't be a stranger, hit me up, I would love to chat and hang out with y'all. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.